Well, that intro was longer than my material. So I'm just, a while ago, when I started doing a few resources and started to write, a friend of mine who had written a lot of stuff said, when you write a bio about yourself, he said, you want people to think that the order of the universe is God, then you. As he said, that's how you, and it never felt quite right to do that, but Ed, you make it seem like it's me and God kind of. Thank you. It's a little bit intimidating when the funniest, most energetic person in the room is a 68-year-old phenom with doing tattoo bits. Good gosh, I'm gonna bring you to my junior high winter camp. Thrilled to be with you guys today. I've been in the wonderful state of Indiana for a few days. I flew in Friday night, and Saturday, excuse me for doing this. Steve, I don't know how to get this going. Sorry. Steve's going to be up and down all day long. I guaranteed. You told me to push a certain button, and that button disappeared. Oh, wait, it's already on there. Oh, Steve, you're a genius. Okay, thanks. There it is. Look at that. There you go. It's working. This guy. Oh, gosh. But I flew in Friday night and spent all day Saturday at a youth conference with teenagers for the United Methodist Church, and had a blast and was a little bit out of my element. I don't do a lot with what we would call like the mainline denominations, and the gentleman who spoke before me, it's a big old room full of junior high and high school kids, and the guy that spoke before me was actually the bishop of the conference, and he came up and he had this 6-foot-tall wooden staff that apparently gets given to you when you get bishoped, when you become the bishop, and he came out with it and he put it in a stand, and it was very, very ominous and a very powerful staff, I guess. And he talked about and then I come out and do fart jokes. It was a very interesting dynamic between the bishop and myself. And then yesterday came up with TK, and I'm just thankful to be here. Ed and I, my first exposure to CE National was with Ed. I don't know, 13, 14 years ago or something. And then kind of every other year since then, I've come out and done some stuff with TK, and I consider this organization a friend of mine. I really it's good to have ministry friends that you can just kind of, you might not see each other all the time, but when you do, you go, man, we're kind of kindred spirits, and we're in this thing together, and it's just really, really important. A little bit about myself. I've been married for 23 years. I've got two kids. My daughter is a junior at Azusa Pacific University, which is a decently sized, one of the bigger evangelical Christian colleges in the country, and she's studying English and journalism, and she's dating one of the youth pastors on my team at my church. So that's a very interesting dynamic. I always make sure that he remembers there's a paycheck connected to how well he's treating my daughter. So that's nice. It's nice to have some leverage while I've got it. And my son is a senior in high school, and he is 6'2", and he's a man child, and I mean that with everything you think I mean it when you think about teenagers. He's a man, and he's still kind of a kid in a whole lot of, in that whole adolescent development thing. I mean, we're just, it's still going strong in our house, and it's in a weird spot when you go, man, my son could kick my butt in a heartbeat, and at the same time he throws a temper tantrum if he can't find his cell phone. It's like, how does this work? It's just an interesting dynamic. Like Ed said, I've been at Saddleback since 1997. Been in youth ministry full-time since 1988. I got asked to be a part-time junior high pastor at my home church during my senior year of college. And part-time became full-time in a couple months, and it took about 8 years for me to finish my senior year of college, because I just fell in love with youth ministry. And the more and more I did youth ministry, the less and less I wanted to take classes. And I just kind of limped to the finish line of my college education, did my graduate work at the same school in Christian leadership, and worked at my home church for about 6 years. That's where I met my wife. And we got married when my wife was 18 and a half. Nothing scandalous at all. Just always have to say that. Nothing scandalous. And I tell people I wouldn't recommend it, but it's been really good for us. And after that, we were at that church for about 6 years. I spent 3 years at Skyline Wesleyan with John Maxwell. And those of you who do leadership reading, you know that name. And my wife worked with him, directly worked in his organization while I worked at the church. And then we've been at Saddleback since 97, all the way from 88 until, 2009, 2010, somewhere in there. I did nothing but junior high ministry. It's all I ever did was full-time junior high ministry. In every church, I've always been blessed to be able to focus on that. And then, back 6 or 7 years ago, my role started to shift and change. Currently, I'm the pastor of students. I oversee junior high through college on all of our campuses. We have soon to be 10 campuses in Southern California, not the venues, but individual campuses. And we have 4 international campuses, one in Manila, one in Hong Kong, one in Buenos Aires, and one in Berlin. And I oversee, I'm like what they would say is like a solid or a strong dotted line of accountability to the youth ministries there. So somehow I'm responsible to make sure that youth ministry in Hong Kong is like 100% Saddleback, but 100% contextualized to Hong Kong. Please don't ask me how that's working out for us. Just please don't ask. Same with Buenos Aires, and yet same with the church in the beach town 20 minutes south of us. We all have to be Saddleback, but we all have to be contextualized. And if you're interested in talking about multi-site youth ministry, I just read an article saying some prognosticators feel like multi-site is just beginning. We're just seeing it. We're scratching the surface with the multi-site trend. And it is a trend, right? I mean, it might be a long-lasting trend, but it's a trend. But a lot of people are saying we're just starting to scratch the surface. And researchers and people that study the church are recognizing that there's churches of 300 people that are starting to use multi-site as a growth strategy, as opposed to, and it's certainly not replacing planting churches, but it's just a new way of planting churches, and so I'm not sure it's going away. Sometimes I wish it would. Somebody asked me the other day, hey, if you were tapped on the shoulder and you were in charge of Saddleback, what's the first thing you'd do? And I was like, well, I'd probably shut down the church in Hong Kong, because I'm not sure. I'm just freestyling, but I might shut down the church in Hong Kong, which, if Pastor Rick ever sees this video, I'm just joking, Pastor Rick. I would never do that. But Ed, thank you. 100 resources, and on the little talk about making somebody look good, you listed most of them in the little pamphlet. Nothing. A table full of books. And there's not one with my name on it. No. You got hacks like Doug Fields, and you got like 15 from Doug Fields up there. Anyway, hey, just one more little survey. Raise your hand, just out of curiosity. You're a full-time youth pastor, or you're full-time staff. Maybe you oversee a bunch of stuff. Oh, that's a whole bunch. How many of you are volunteer? You volunteer? Thank you. How many of you are part-time? Okay, keep your hands up. Raise them high. Part-time. Look around, people. See, they're the bitter ones. Because they work like they're full-time, but they get paid like they're a volunteer. It's the part-timers. So, man, we're glad you guys are here. Those of us who are full-time, it's easy to come to something like this, right? It's in our job description to some degree. The church probably picked up the bill. It's like a little mini vacation in Winona Lake. But for those of you who are volunteering part-time, I just like everything else in youth ministry, this is probably a little bit more of a sacrifice for you. Just like almost everything else that you do for the kingdom, it's a little bit more of a sacrifice for you to be here. So thank you, and I hope it's worth your time. We were praying earlier, and my prayer was just that the Holy Spirit over the next day and a half that you guys are together, that at some point the Holy Spirit would whisper once or twice in your ear, this is for you. This is for you. Because we're going to cover a lot of territory. We're going to move fast through some things. I'm not the only person presenting. There's other stuff. You're going to have lots of conversations. And sometimes, it's that old analogy of it's like drinking from a fire hydrant, right? where you're thirsty, but wow, that's a little bit too much of a good thing. And sometimes you come to these and it can feel like that. And you go, man, God, what do you want? This is a lot of stuff. And the worst thing you can do is ever go home from something like this and start making a ton of changes, because then your volunteers go, oh, yeah, we went to one of those conferences again, didn't you? Because you come home, we're going to change this, and we're going to do this, and we got to have 3 meetings this week. And you're going, okay, that's the last time we let you out of the coop. Giving you some time just creates a bunch more work and chaos for everybody else. But I do think that when you gather for a day and a half, there's a reason for it. And God's got something for you here. And I don't know what it is. And it may not be anything that I share. And that's fine. It might be something that he has for you that you pick up on from somebody else during a lunchtime conversation. But just be sensitive to God, and maybe that you just kind of make that your prayer too, your posture. God, just give me one or two things. One or two things. Because my hunch is your youth ministry doesn't need to be completely renovated. That's my hunch. Unless you're using junior hires to smuggle arms into Iran. Short of that, what you're doing in youth ministry is probably an okay strategy. You're probably doing pretty good youth ministry. And the reason I say that is, literally, the youth ministry industry, let's just call it that for a second, is littered with really good resources and really good research. And those of you who went to a Christian school and you have a degree of some type, some of you have youth ministry degrees, some of you have ministry. There's no shortage of information and knowledge and good stuff. And yet, I've come to be convinced that you can take everything you've ever read, and I think you can boil it down to a pretty simple youth ministry formula, which is just caring adult plus Jesus plus teenager equals good stuff. And that's it. I don't know what you're doing. And if we were to take the time to sit around the tables and share a little bit about what's your youth ministry look like, it looks different. There's differences, there's nuances. It's different than mine. But I know this. If you're in the business as a leader of connecting adults who love Jesus and like teenagers, I didn't say love teenagers. You see, here's the problem with that. Everybody in your church, if they're a Christian, they love teenagers. They have to. They're a Christian, right? They have to. They don't like them, but they love them, right? Oh, those crazy teenagers. I love them in the name of the Lord. Right? Oh, gosh. Those teenagers messing up the fellowship hall again. God love them. I'm glad he does. Somebody's got to. I guess I have to too because I love Jesus. Right? That's most people's attitude. Most people in your church, when they think about where can I make a kingdom impact, if they're thinking that, most people in our churches aren't thinking that. We could talk about that for a while if we want. But the ones who are thinking about how do I make a kingdom impact, most of them are not thinking, the youth ministry, the teenagers. I want to invest in them. They're thankful that you do. Some of them tithe generously and have built you nice facilities across the parking lot, far away from their territory, so that you can minister to those teenagers, right? But most of them don't think about ministering to teens themselves. And so when you find yourself in the position of going, how do I connect adults who love Jesus and like teenagers and are willing to let their lives intersect? When they're willing to let their life... In our youth ministry, we tell our volunteers, we want kids to rub shoulders with your radness. That's what we say. Because we think, man, any adult who's willing to spend time, they're awesome, they're rad. So we say, just let teenagers rub shoulders with your radness. That's kind of that's their job description. Let your life intersect with theirs. If that's happening, you're doing good youth ministry. I grew up in a youth ministry of 3 kids. 3 kids when I was in junior high. And it was me and Mike Pace and this girl, can't remember her name, and our volunteer youth worker. His name was John Miller. John Miller must have been this, I don't know, man, he was old, 25, 26-year-old dude. But when you're 12, 25 is ancient, which, by the way, all of you who are 25 and under, you're still cool until you're 20. At 25, we're all the same age. To a 12-year-old, Ed's 25. Ed actually, to most of us, Ed's 25. But John Miller would come in our youth room in our little church in Whittier, California, our junior high room, I don't know, was the size of this area right here. Smaller than a typical bedroom, probably. Half the size of a typical bedroom. Tiny. And there's a 3-cushion leather couch. They couldn't give us a nice youth room, but they gave us a leather couch. That was pretty cool. A leather couch, 3-cushion leather couch. Me, Mike, the girl, and John Miller would come in every Sunday, frazzled, running late. I don't think he prepared a lesson ever. If he did, it was the kind of lesson that we've all been there where he's preparing at the red light, right? It's a red light lesson where you're oh, praise the Lord, a red light. And I'm seeing like, going, okay. Oh, green light. And he come frazzled in. He just bubble his way through. He was a terrible youth worker. He was terrible. He never told us to invite a friend. I don't know if John Miller knew we were allowed to bring friends to church. Never crossed our mind to bring chairs or friends to church. In hindsight, I go, it's a 3-cushion couch. There's me, Mike, and the girl. If a newbie comes, the girl's going to leave her seat on the couch. And being a 12-year-old egalitarian, I didn't want to kick her off the couch. Just in training for marriage, and so we just never. It was terrible. Name your ineffective youth ministry and take a picture of it, and it was that. But John Miller came to my Pop Warner football games almost every Saturday, and he'd sit right there with my mom and dad and talk to them and cheer me on. And John Miller came to me and Mike played in the same little league, and every time we were playing each other, he was a very savvy youth worker. The old kill 2 birds with 1 stone, right? Like I got 2 dudes and go instead of going to 2 games, I'll wait until they're playing each other and go to 1. Right? That's youth ministry 101. You don't show up for the first quarter of the freshman girls basketball game. Which freshman girls basketball? Talk about hell on earth. Final score, 8-4. You show up like with 5 minutes left, and then you get credit for being there, but you weren't actually there. But he would show up. His wife and he lived in this little tiny apartment complex, but they had a swimming pool. And once a month, he would ask me and Mike and the girl to come to his house and swim, and his wife would barbecue hot dogs. It was awesome. And one day, on a Sunday, and it was a Sunday like every other, he came in kind of frazzled and late, but he was a little bit more serious than normal. And he pulled his chair up a little bit closer to the couch than normal. And he said, "Hey, guys, I got an announcement." And I remember this so vividly. He looked us each in the eyes. Kurt, Mike, girl. I got a new job, and my wife and I we're gonna move to be closer to that job. It's about an hour away, and we just decided, we need to go to church in our community. So today, maybe next Sunday, is going to be our last Sunday as your junior high Sunday school teacher. All right. And I went home, and in the little kitchen in our little apartment in Whittier, California, just sobbed. Selfish stuff. I'm never going to go to church again. How could he do this to us? Just sobbed. And those of you who are parents, especially those of you who are parents of maybe teenagers, you get older and you go, gosh, in hindsight, what would we do different? We're always double second guessing ourselves. And in hindsight, I go, man, my parents made an interesting decision. But they said to me in that moment, in that kitchen, they said, Kurt, man, you're halfway through junior high. You're almost done in 8th grade. It's up to you to decide why you were going to church. And if you're going to church because you like John and not Jesus, well, and if you don't want to go, we're going to have to let you decide whether or not you go to church in 8th grade. And I said, well, then I choose not to go to church and go back to church until the summer going into my junior year of high school. So it's in, a 2.5, 3-year window. To this day, when I look at the scars that I carry and some of the baggage that I still kind of carry around and the regret, the vast majority of it is from that window of time where I wandered away for a while. And didn't get back to church until a buddy of mine at a bigger youth group invited me to beach camp. And met a bunch of kids who loved Jesus and met another youth pastor who wasn't nearly as cool as John. But I had these memories of John and church, and when I got invited back, I thought, well, if there's people like him there, I guess I'll give it a shot. Got called to ministry, the whole deal. You fast forward, I'm 22 years old. I'm a senior in college. I'm working part-time. The church had convinced me not to be an RA my senior year, but to live at home and drive and take classes so I could be more involved in the church. Somebody at the church donated this 1960 Chevy Biscayne, which nowadays would be awesome if we still had it. It was a big old turd then. And I'm coming home from school one day, and I pull into In-N-Out, which is a hamburger place, and I eat my meal. I come back out to my car, and it won't start. And I don't know anything about cars. I lift up the hood, look at the engine, think if I look strong enough and hard enough, something might change. Nothing. And as I'm sitting there kind of staring at my car, out of the corner of my eye, this like kind of avocado green 1970s-ish conversion van pulls up. The kind of van that you say to children, do not go near the van. Stay away from the van. Run from the van. Well, John Miller drove a 1970s-ish avocado conversion van like 10 years earlier when I was 12 years old. This guy hops out of the car, and you know, for 10 years from 25 to 35, you don't change much. From 12 to 22, you change quite a bit. This guy hops out of the car. He looks at me. I recognize him, but before I can even say his name, instantly, Kurt Johnston. John Miller? Yeah, hey, what's wrong? My car won't fit. Can't start my car. Now let me look at it. He fiddles with it for 2 minutes, gets it started. He said, hey, are you hungry? I'm going In-N-Out. I had just eaten, but I said, starving. It's John Miller. Hadn't seen him since the day he left the church. He takes me to In-N-Out. We're sitting down. I get my food. I joke saying he wasn't a Super 8 youth worker, but man, he was savvy enough. I must have been 2 bites into my meal. And he says, so, what's God been doing in your life? Now, I'm so glad God had been doing something in my life. That would have been the most awkward rest of the meal in history. Not much. It would have been terrible. What's God been doing in your life? So I got to tell him the whole story. I started where I'm in my kitchen crying, my mom and dad, my journey, my struggle, my hurts, all my junk, going back to church, giving my life to Christ, feeling called. And then I got to say, John, you'll never believe this, but I'm doing what you used to do. I'm hanging out with junior high kids. I'm a part-time junior high pastor. Now, I don't pretend to think that for the last 10 years, John Miller had laid up at night going, man, whatever happened to Kurt and Mike and the girl? What happened? Whatever. I don't think we were foremost on his mind. But like all of us, there had to have been moments where he thought, did it matter? Does it really make a difference? I spend every Wednesday night with a small group of 7th graders. Normally, I only take 8th grade boys for my small group. This year, I got talked into circling all the way back down and taking 7th graders. Oh my gosh. It's horrific. Yeah, it's horrific. There's 13 dudes, me and another guy. He's older than me, and if I can say, he's not nearly as cool, as my co-leader. And 13, every spectrum. We have Asperger's, we have ADHD, we have like the nerdiest nerd in Nerd Town, smart, we have athletic, we have churched, we have unchurched. It is the melting pot all in one group, and they're crazy. And this guy who I co-lead with, he's an architect for the city, and he is like the 7th grade boy whisperer. Every time he says anything, they lean in. Oh, Mr. Tom, tell us more. We're sitting at your feet, Mr. Tom. And when I show up, it's like, ah, and they don't, they blow me off and don't pay attention. Guys, come on in. Yeah, catch us if you can. They run down the street. It's terrible. You think I'm exaggerating? I can't exaggerate. It's horrific. I texted him the other night on the way home from youth group. I just said, Tom, you are a really good youth pastor. you're a really good youth pastor, because he's just fantastic. But I go home on most Wednesday nights going, does it matter? Is this what I signed up for? Are these kids going to remember these moments? Yeah, they'll probably remember the time I cussed at them, out of frustration. But beyond that, God. And John Miller probably had a few of those moments, right? Where he thought, well, I know he did, because as I'm telling him the story, I said, hey, John, I never have to say thanks. And as I said thanks, just tears started welling up in his eyes. And he said, man, sometimes I wonder if any of that stuff, if it made a massive difference. I'm so glad I saw you today. It was just one of those awesome, awesome moments. And John Miller, he's the youth ministry formula. He never read a book. This is back in 1980. There was 2 youth ministry books in existence in 1980. Ed wrote one when he was 40, back in 1980. And somebody else wrote one. But that's about all there was back. There just wasn't. He didn't go to a youth specialties conference. He didn't have his degree in youth ministry. He said yes at the wrong time. I think he probably thought he was volunteering to lead the men's ministry, and he was actually volunteering. He just wasn't paying attention when he raised his hand. Like, yes, John, you're in charge of junior high. Crap, But what he was he was the formula. An adult who loved Jesus, who liked teenagers, and he was willing, in his imperfect, untrained way, to let our lives intersect. And it made all the difference in the world. I know it made all the difference in the world for a couple of us. There's my family. That picture is a couple years old. But I look at my family, and they've heard the story of John Miller. I talk to them about it a lot. And I can't look at my family without seeing John Miller's fingerprint, his handprints all over my life. I would not have said yes to the invitation to go back to beach camp had John Miller not planted some seeds in my life. Had he not bought a little Honda 100 dirt bike so he could take me and Mike Pace dirt bike riding. Had he not had us over his house for swimming parties, I wouldn't have said yes to the invitation to go back to church. I wouldn't have had fond memories of it. I look at my son and my daughter, and they both love Jesus. My wife, I see John Miller when I look at that. Here's a picture of Mike Pace, a couple years old. Still one of my really good friends. Really good friends. He and his wife Jen and their kids, and I can't look at Mike's family. He loves Jesus. He works for what's the movie company? Spielberg's company, DreamWorks. Works for DreamWorks up in Hollywood. He's salt and light in a really dark industry. Loves Jesus. I can't look at his family without seeing John Miller's handprints all over his family. Believe it or not, I have a picture of the girl. There she is. She looks pretty good. Looks pretty good. Now let's pretend for just a moment. I don't know where the girl is, but let's just pretend that she's far from God. Let's just assume she's far from God. John Miller, fumbling, bumbling, uneducated, just doing what he was trying to do. Loved Jesus, liked teenagers. He let his life intersect with them for a couple years. John Miller, 2 out of 3. 2 out of 3. Jesus had one walk away. And Jesus had that whole God thing going for him, right? He had like a little extra something in there that we don't. He had one walk away. 2 out of 3. I don't know what your youth ministry looks like. Looks different than mine. It's not better. It's not worse. It's just different than my ministry. It looks different than the one of the people you're sitting next to. Looks different than the youth ministries of the men and women who have written books. And we get so hung up on that stuff. Our strategies and our purposes and our paradigms. And I think there's a place for all that. And we're actually going to talk a little bit about that today. But I wanted to start out by going, man, whatever you're doing, It's working. Your youth ministry is working. And you're making an impact in the lives of kids that you may not see right away. John Miller saw zero fruit in the immediate moments of his youth ministry to me and Mike and the girl. We were a couple tools, and the girl, she was, I guess, I can't remember anything about her, but I'm sure she was fine. But we didn't do anything. We didn't say thanks ever. We didn't bring a friend. We didn't volunteer to help. We didn't make life easy on him. We just took, and he gave, and somehow that produced lifelong followers of Jesus in at least 2 of the 3 kids that he poured his life into for a period of time. It's a little bit of a long introduction, but really, I tell a shorter version of that anytime I talk to youth workers, because I think there's some things in ministry that are overrated. I could get on a soapbox later if you want. I think leadership's overrated. I think it's overrated. Somehow we live in a day and age where, people like us, we strive to be leaders more than we strive to be pastors and shepherds, and I just don't get it. I work for a church. If I want to be a leader, I'd go work in the industry. And one of my best friends is the CFO of the world's largest extermination company. Very impressive. They own Orkin and a whole bunch of other extermination companies. He's a leader. He's the best leader I've ever been around. Well, that's not what I do. I'm a pastor. I'm a shepherd. I think leadership has gotten overrated. I think in youth ministry, paradigms and strategies and things like that have kind of gotten overrated, and we just need to go, okay, let's just love on kids. And it's working. We can make it work a little bit better when we put some thought into it, and we're going to talk. We're all here. So we can if I said, see ya, thanks for bringing me, you guys going, that's give me something else. Well, we'll talk. We'll give you guys some other stuff, but wanted to kind of kick off with that. Ed, and what time are we taking our break, Ed?
45. Yeah, you're good.
We're good. Okay, great. What I wanted to do, and Ed and I talked, and we're just going to freestyle a little bit because Ed and I were on 2 different pages, and Ed's page was right, and Ed is in charge. So what we're going to do is, I just want to spend a few minutes talking a little bit about how we do youth ministry at Saddleback. Just because people like to know, and people will inevitably ask me, oh, that's hooked on my backpack, oh well. People will inevitably ask me anyway, hey, what does your youth ministry at Saddleback look like? If you've read, well, no, if you've read this book, Purpose-Driven Youth Ministry, what's interesting about Purpose-Driven Youth Ministry, how many of you have read Purpose-Driven Youth Ministry? Most of the full-time hands, for sure, right? Part-timers are going, dude, you kidding me? They don't pay me enough to read. I've read most of it. But if you haven't, it's a great book. It's the best-selling youth ministry book in history, believe it or not. It's the best-selling youth ministry book in history, and it goes into great detail about how Saddleback Church has done church, because it's based on Purpose-Driven Church. It's the youth ministry version of Purpose-Driven Church, but it's how we've done youth ministry for 20 years, or how we did youth ministry for 20 years, and we've changed a lot. I'm not an academic. And for me, when I inherited the lead of Saddleback Student Ministries, I thought, how do I honor and stay true to, because at Saddleback Church, you will be purpose-driven. You will be purpose-driven. You will use the word purpose anytime you can. So I do, because I have a mortgage payment that I have to hit every month. So purpose, it's all about purpose. You got purpose. Every time I say it, I ensure I get a paycheck. But when I took it over, I thought, man, this is really hard for me to train our volunteers on, because there's just so much. It's hard to, what really tipped us over the scales was when Rick started saying we're going to do international campuses. I thought, how do I train international people when I'm going to have limited input in their lives on this? But how do I do a youth ministry that still reflects this? And so we've changed a few things. And I want to just kind of draw out. My goal was I want a youth ministry. I want to run a youth ministry that I can explain on a napkin at a restaurant. That's what I want. I want to sit down with a parent and they say, why do you guys do what you do? How come? Let me show you. When I'm inviting you to join our youth ministry team at Starbucks, and they're like, well, what do you guys do? It seems so confusing. Man, you guys have a lot going on. Let me show you. And I can now there's some details that fill up notebooks and things, but you don't need the notebooks and things to explain what we do at Saddleback Church. And part of the reason why I'm not hesitant to share is it's not a big church way of doing youth ministry. There's nothing big church about it. It's not a multi-site paradigm. There's nothing multi-site about the way we do youth ministry. It's not the best way to do youth ministry. It's just a way to do youth ministry. But I love to learn how other people are doing it and how you guys are structured. So Ed and I thought, well, it'd be kind of fun for people to see how we do it at Saddleback, and it might kind of spawn some good conversation or some thinking. So the first picture I would draw, I'm a terrible artist, by the way, just disclaimer. So it looks way better on our little volunteer notebook than it does when I draw it at Starbucks with a volunteer, because they will often think this is like a weird cow with 3 legs or long udders. But real quickly, and then I'll... Our desire is to have a well-balanced, healthy youth ministry. The wrong question you ever ask is, how do I grow my youth ministry? It's the wrong question. It's the question we all ask. It's the question our elders ask. It's the question some of us got asked in a weird interview moment, right, when we were interviewing for our church. So what are you going to do to draw more kids? How are you going to grow? Right? And how you answer that in an interview, that's where you go, okay, what's the answer they want to hear? What's the answer they want to hear? Because if you don't get it right, they're not happy. But the real answer, or the real question is, why does my ministry exist? How do we be a healthy youth ministry? What I've decided at Saddleback, SSM stands for Saddleback Student Ministries. I want us to be a balanced 3-legged stool. There's 3 legs to our ministry. And I think there's 3 legs to your ministry, and there were 3 legs to John Miller's ministry. He just didn't know it at the time. A ministry to students, the ministry to our volunteers, and the ministry to parents. Historically, you can kind of draw a timeline of, let's just say when did Young Life start? Ed? 60s? Okay, 60s. And you can draw the timeline out to 2015. Historically, youth ministry, the timeline has kind of slowly encompassed, and this is kind of the order of what youth ministry has grown into. It started out, we're just going to minister to students. That's all we're going to focus on. The church isn't reaching students. Parents aren't bringing their kids to church. Therefore, places like Young Life, we're just going to reach more kids, right? And it's students. Churches were even mostly students, which is why you had your own room. Even if it was the little closet, they gave you the little closet for your student ministries. Then we started realizing, well, man, we can't do this alone. There's no Lone Rangers. I can only, John Miller's limited. Really, he was really good with me, Mike, and the girl, but if there would have been 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 of us, his ability to do that would have started to wane. He can't go to everybody's football games. He can't buy everybody a little Honda 100 motorcycle. He can't do it. He's got to bring other people around. And then in the last, decade or so, we've really started, I think, universally as a church, begun to go, there's a third area that I need to not just pay attention to, but I need to view as a vital part of my ministry. And things like family pastor positions have bubbled up. Some of you might have that title. I'm the family ministries pastor. And a lot of us, our churches are still kind of back here. And we're going, yeah, but man, what about this? And it's not as sexy. It's not as tangible. And sometimes our churches have a hard time letting us spend too much time on that because they don't see the fruit. And Kurt, why do you got to minister to dads? Because we have a men's ministry. And why do we have to? You just get more kids. Just get more kids. Just get more kids. That's kind of a typical. And what we've done at Saddleback is this is our new picture, and we're trying to say all three legs have to be equally important. They don't all get equal resources and even equal time, but in our mind, they are equally important, right? Just like both of my kids are equally important, they don't get equal resources and time. My son requires way more of both. He's a high-maintenance teenage kid. My daughter is like the lowest maintenance person in the history of mankind. My son's a Porsche, and my daughter is a Chevy F-150 truck. She just cruises along. My son, you got to tinker with, right? And everything that goes along with that analogy would work. So that's our picture. Now, what I want to talk about is how do we? Because I would say this, like our paid team. I tell them for the most part, you spend 75% of your time here, and then everybody kind of picks and chooses based on their job description where they spend the other 25%. But because, and this will be big church sounding. I'll try not to very often. But because we've got enough youth pastors, even if 4 of my team members give 25% of their time to parent ministry, that's 100%. That's a full-time job description. It's split out between 4 people giving 25%. But when we just started saying, hey, this is really important, we need to make sure people are thinking about it, all of a sudden we had the resources. I know that's challenging when you're by yourself. But I think the picture is a valid picture regardless of the size of your ministry. Is we've got these three people groups that we need to minister to. If you were to blow this out, the student leg, and say, what does our ministry to students look like? Well, that's what this book really is. But we've changed it. In our ministry to students, we decided we've got 3 arenas. And you have 3 arenas. I don't think there's 4 arenas, and I don't think there's only 2. I think in every youth ministry, there's exactly 3 arenas in which you minister to teenagers. You minister to teenagers in the large group setting. Every time you're all together. Now, our large group setting was 3 of us with John Miller, but that was our large group. That's when we were all there. Your large group might be Sunday night. Your large group might be Wednesday night. When you all go to camp, when you all have a dodgeball tournament, but anytime you do something where everybody's invited, that's one arena that you can minister. We use my name, my son's name is Cole. Cole is in the large group, and he gets ministered to in that setting. You have another arena that you can minister to kids, and that is in a smaller group setting. It doesn't have to be a formal small group structure, but anytime you break your group into, hey, boys are over here, girls are over here tonight. Hey, seniors, we're going to do something special for you. Junior hires, we're going to do something special for you. As your ministry grows, you start doing a little bit more strategic small groups. And now you've got, 7th grade boys and 8th grade girls and 12th grade boys. But that's an arena. And Cole is also part of a small group. So he's getting ministered to in both arenas. And then you have what we've just labeled it as every single individual life. So Cole is, he's part of the large group. He's in a small group, but he's also Cole Johnston. And there's also an opportunity for our ministry to minister to Cole. Different, away from the large group setting and away from the small group setting. But there's some Cole ministry going on when his small group leader calls Cole up, takes him out to Starbucks, right? That's individual life ministry going on. Our goal is to expose kids at the large group to what? Our purpose statement is our ministry helps. We rewrote our purpose statement. Helps is a very strategic word in our new purpose statement. Our ministry helps. We don't do it all. I was at the church I was at Sunday or Saturday. I took a picture of it because I'm going to steal it and put it someplace. But I think it came straight from the Orange Conference. But it was this awesome piece of art with a couple thousand red marbles and like 40-something yellow marbles. It was 3,042 or something. And it said, what are you doing with your 3,000? And the idea is to parents, they have 3,000 hours a year, and the church has about 42 hours a year. So, hey, parents, what are you doing with your 3,000? Because you got your kids for 3,000 hours. We as a church have your kid for 42 hours or whatever it is. Well, when you think about that, you go, our ministry, all we do is help. That's all we do. We can't do it all. We just help. But we help students become exposed to, experience, and express Christ, his kingdom, and wait for it, Saddleback, the purposes of his church. Christ, his kingdom, and the purposes of his church. So when Cole comes to the large group every week for a year straight, he gets exposed to, at an entry level, the things of Jesus Christ, the 5 purposes of worship, evangelism, fellowship, discipleship, and ministry. But it's at a very safe, bring your friend, come one, come all level. And it's an exposed level event. And when parents come to us and say, how come the weekend isn't deep enough? Well, because we're exposing kids at that event. Why aren't you doing verse by verse, word for word expository preaching like Calvary Chapel? Well, because it's an exposed level event. We're just exposing kids. We want Cole to feel safe bringing a friend. It's church for the unchurched and church, but it's an exposed level. In a small group, we want them to experience together in community Christ, his kingdom, and the purposes of his church. It's an experiential thing. It gets a little bit deeper, not only in content, but it gets deeper in community. It gets deeper in prayer. It gets deeper in the one another's, right? Pray for one another, encourage one another. We do the one another's at a deeper. It's experiential in nature, almost by default. It's experiential. You don't have to do a ton in small groups to make it experiential if you just make it more discussion oriented and you do a few things together. And then the ultimate goal is that individual students, our goal, if you want, some of you already have, right? Our goal is that every single one of our kids, outside of the walls of the church, in their own lifestyle, would express Christ, his kingdom, and the purposes of his church. And there's a whole bunch of stuff that happens in the church and out of the church that are they're individual things. So when we take students on a missions trip, we would put missions here as individual life. Because they don't all sign up together. They don't even all sign up with their small group. Cole decides, I think I want to go on a missions trip. Or his life group leader taps him on the shoulder and says, hey, Cole, man, you need to go to Rwanda this summer. You need to go. And Cole goes, man, I never thought of that. I heard the announcement. I don't even know if my friends are going. Most of the guys in my small group can't go. But I think I'll go. So this is the target. You've heard the saying, if you aim for nothing, what? You hit it every time. So this is our target. We hit it every now and then. We miss it a lot. But at least we know what we're aiming for. At least we know our strategy. I can sit down over coffee with a parent and go, this is it. This is it in a nutshell. If you want nuance and detail, we can get into that. But this is it in a nutshell. And so the target we're aiming for is Cole comes to the large group program. He's exposed to stuff. It's entry level. We're doing a Friendship 101 series. And for some reason, that weekend is the week that we also do our ministry spotlight. And so a high school girl gets up and she shares her ministry spotlight about going to the food kitchen with her small group and serving at the food kitchen. So now in a very quick 2-minute testimony, he's been exposed to, in addition to other stuff, he got exposed to the purpose of ministry. Just real quick, real basic. We don't require it, but what if at Cole's life group that week, his leader says, hey, how many of you guys were at church this last week? And most of the hands go up. And he says, what about Brianna's story about going to the soup kitchen? That was cool. The guys are like, yeah, that's cool. She's cute, that kind of thing. And his small group leader says, well, here's what I was thinking. How about if next week, for a small group, why don't we just go to the soup kitchen together? Seemed like her story was cool. It seemed like she really liked it. Why don't we go do that together? And they're like, all right. So the next week, we don't require it. We might not even know what happened. Cole's small group, they go now and they experience together what they were exposed to. All of a sudden, soup kitchen has a whole new meaning. Now, what if Cole comes home and he says, hey, Dad, soup kitchen tonight. Kind of interesting. I don't think we're going to go back because most of the guys weren't really into it. And Oleg, that's my son's small group leader, Oleg was kind of frustrated. And I don't think he's going to sign us up to go back anytime soon. But Dad, something about the soup kitchen. I kind of dug on it. Can I go back sometime? Now, whether he goes back once on his own or once a week on his own, doesn't matter. The moment he goes back on his own, as an individual, Cole Johnston on his own, outside of the walls of the church, is expressing the kingdom. He's expressing Christ's kingdom and the biblical purposes of his church. That's our target. That's what we aim for. So for us, how I very easily defend, because people get on us all the time, the bigger your church gets, the more your youth group grows, people start assuming that you're doing shallow youth ministry. Oh, you're just giving away a bunch of Xboxes. Right? Hey, if I had an unlimited budget, large church, I apologize. We have a $20 million youth building. A $20 million youth building. Who needs a $20 million youth building? Nobody. You don't need a $20 million youth building. I came to Christ because of John Miller on a leather couch, right? I mean, come on. Nobody needs a $20 million youth building. When your church has a $20 million youth building, and you have the type of attendance that we have, people very quickly go to the shallow card, the attractional ministry card, right? Which I will defend on every mountaintop. Get me to the top of Everest, and I'll defend attractional ministry on the top of Mount Everest. Here's the thing. I don't know if it's a red herring or a straw man, because I can never figure out which is which. It's one of those. It might be both. But the attractional ministry argument is a straw man red herring, because I've never met a youth ministry that does only attractional youth ministry. I've never met one that says, yeah, all we do is this big crazy event where we give crap away to get a whole bunch of kids, and we pat ourselves on the back because we think that matters in the kingdom. I've never met anybody, any youth pastor, that their strategy starts and finishes at the attractional level. People want to say it does because they want to shoot holes in it. But for us, the reason we have an exposed level event every single weekend, this is pragmatism, so beware. It is a little bit of a numbers game. It is. Because most students don't instantly enter your program at this desire. They don't come in, they come in as individuals, but they don't come in wanting to express through their lifestyle the things of the kingdom. So if my desire is to get as many kids in South Orange County as I possibly can, living a life that expresses the good news of Jesus Christ in their high schools and in their junior highs and on their college campuses, it makes sense that I'm going to do some stuff up here that attracts a whole bunch of them, and I'm going to try to get as many of those as I possibly can here, so that some of those here will go, I get it. For us, where I think, at least I can't say for other churches with an attractional model, this number and this number, and back in the day, and this is part of the reason why I struggled with our old paradigm, it was super linear. Back in the day, we would have said it's healthy if this number is about 50% of this number, because it's a higher spiritual commitment. What we realize is kids just show up wherever they want. You can say small groups are for believers, small groups are for believers, small groups are for believers, but non-believers show up for small group. They just, oftentimes more non-believers show up here, by the way, now, right? Because we've become so service-minded that non-believers do show up wanting to go on mission trips and all that. They show up wherever they want. Our number here and here right now is almost exactly the same. It's almost exactly the same. So when I hear people say, well, yeah, if you just attract a bunch of kids, you can't, what are you doing with them? I'm going, well, 100% of them are in small groups, if that matters, but nobody wants to talk about that stuff. They just want to throw rocks at the model, right? They just want to throw attractional ministry stones. They don't want to actually have an honest conversation about what happens below the surface. Most of the critics. I'm getting defensive. I apologize. So anyway, Ed, that's what we're doing. That's how it looks. At Saddleback, there's a little bit more to it than that, but really, you know, if you were a volunteer, what is it? If a parent wanted to know, I'd give them a 2-minute version of that. I'd draw it on a napkin, and that'd be about. But John Miller, all of us together in a large group, would have worked for John. He and his wife could have split me and Mike and the girl up once in a while for a little bit more specific, right? All of a sudden, there's a small group, and there was me, there was Mike, and there was the girl. It's not a large church paradigm. In fact, I would say it's the smaller your youth group, the easier it is to have a strategy kind of like that. There we go. Questions, comments, pushbacks. I think it's break time. There we go. Thanks, guys.